When millionaire CEO Brian James left his safe wide open, he expected the new maid to peek, maybe even steal. But instead, Rita Jackson stared at the stacks of cash, blinked back tears, and whispered, "I've been poor, not broken." That moment hit harder than theft ever could. The morning sun hit the steel and glass mansion like a spotlight on power. Brian James adjusted his cufflinks with the same precision he used to dismantle billion-dollar competitors. Methodical, controlled, distant. He stood alone in his office overlooking the city skyline, watching the world below like a man who trusted nothing and no one. On his walnut desk sat a family photo turned face down, its edges worn from being moved but never looked at. Behind him the safe clicked open, intentionally. Wads of cash, heirloom watches, and a diamond-encrusted pen glistened like bait in a trap. Brian didn't blink. "She starts today?" he asked, eyes still on the skyline. "Rita Jackson," his assistant replied. "Background checks clear. No priors. But humble background." Brian gave a single nod. "Let's see what she does when no one's watching." The bus hissed to a stop in front of a high-security gate. Rita Jackson clutched her thrift store handbag and stepped off, the soles of her worn shoes clicking against polished stone like a reminder she didn't belong here. Her heart thudded, but her spine stayed straight. 27 years old, high school diploma, no criminal record, and a resume made of survival, nursing homes, diners, and cleaning other people's messes with quiet grace. She was led into the foyer. Marble floors, gold accents, silence thick enough to choke on. Her eyes drifted to a distant hallway where sunlight caught something metallic, a door ajar. "Your duties are simple," the assistant said. "Clean the office first. Mr. James is out." Rita nodded, eyes respectful, voice calm. "Of course." But as she stepped into the office, she froze. The safe, open, wide. Stacks of money, jewelry, timepieces that probably cost more than her childhood home. She looked behind her. No one. Her breath caught, hands clenched. Her reflection stared back at her in the polished glass cabinet. Small, tired, tempted. Her mother's voice rang in her head like church bells. "What's not yours, don't touch, not even with your thoughts." She turned and walked away. If you were Rita, and no one would ever find out, would you have walked away or taken just one thing? Be honest. Drop your answer in the comments. Brian James didn't speak as he watched the security feed from his office. His assistant stood quietly behind him, unsure whether to feel relieved or rattled. There she was, Rita Jackson, standing in front of the wide-open safe. Perfectly alone. She didn't reach, didn't linger. She just looked. Then her shoulders stiffened and her hand rose, not to touch the safe, but to swipe a tear off her cheek. And then she whispered something, her lips barely moving. "I've been poor, not broken." Brian rewound it, played it again. Poor, not broken. It wasn't the reaction he expected, not even close. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. That line stayed with him like a splinter. She wasn't angry. She wasn't shocked. She was hurt. As if the open safe was more insult than temptation. "Was she aware she was being watched?" he asked flatly. "No, sir, all hidden cams, no signs she noticed. And no fingerprints on anything in the safe. None. She didn't touch a single thing." Brian stood and walked to the window, jaw tight. He was used to people being one of two things, opportunists or manipulators. But this was dignity in its rawest form. It shook something loose in him. Something buried under years of mistrust. And for the first time in a long while, Brian James didn't feel in control. Later that afternoon, Rita was called back to clean the office once more. The safe was now closed, locked, as if nothing had happened. Brian sat behind the desk, pretending to type, watching her out of the corner of his eye. She moved quietly, efficiently, dusting the bookshelves, wiping down the desk, eyes never wandering. He cleared his throat. "You missed a spot." Rita froze. Looked at him, not with fear but calm. "Where, sir?" He gestured vaguely. Behind the cabinet. She cleaned it. He said nothing else. But his eyes never left her. And for the first time, they weren't scanning for flaws, but for truth. Brian paced the length of his penthouse balcony, sleeves rolled, untouched whiskey in hand. She didn't steal. Big deal, he muttered to himself. Doesn't make her a saint. But the words sounded hollow, even to him. He had caught seasoned executives lying over dinner, had watched polished board members steal with smiles on their faces. But Rita? She didn't even look around. She didn't hesitate. She cried. And it wasn't guilt. It was insult, as if he'd violated something sacred inside her. He couldn't stop hearing it. I've been poor, not broken. Brian downed the whiskey, told himself he was overthinking. It was just a maid, just a test. She passed. End of story. But deep down, something he hadn't felt in years gnawed at him. Shame. Rita noticed the difference the next day. Mr. James, the aloof, clipped, emotionless man, kept looking at her, not in a predatory way, not angry, not flirtatious, just confused. Every time she passed him in the hall, his eyes followed, as if trying to solve a riddle he didn't want to admit existed. He spoke to her directly now, but never about anything that mattered. How long have you worked in domestic services? Do you enjoy the job? Do you read? She answered politely, briefly, cautiously. She had cleaned houses for rich men before. None of them asked if she read. That night, Rita sat on the edge of her tiny studio bed, running a cracked comb through her hair. She'd seen the safe. She knew what was inside. And she could tell it had been deliberate. A test. He expected me to steal, she thought. Why? Because I'm poor? Because I'm black? Because I'm new? The question stung, but not as much as the feeling that her dignity had been put on trial without her consent. Still, something in his eyes today made her pause. He wasn't smug. He looked almost guilty, and somehow that made it worse. It was a Friday evening when the elevator jammed. Rita had just finished wiping down the kitchen counters when she got the unexpected request, "Mr. James wants you to bring up his dinner personally." She hesitated. That wasn't protocol. He barely acknowledged her most days, until recently. Still, she did as asked. She stepped into the private elevator with the silver tray, her eyes catching her reflection in the mirrored walls, a woman in a maid's uniform balancing someone else's dinner, and more questions than answers. Halfway up to the penthouse, the elevator jolted, lights flickered, then stopped. Rita's breath caught. She pressed the emergency button. Nothing. Seconds later, the intercom crackled. "It's me," came Brian's voice. Her heart dropped. "Sir?" "I'm in here too." Silence stretched between them. "I didn't realize—" she began. "Neither did I," he muttered. "System glitch. Backup's delayed." She turned slowly, and there he was, standing in the far corner. No jacket, sleeves rolled. Not CEO perfect, just human, trapped, with her. For the first time, they were in the same space, same air, same silence, with nowhere to go. "You don't talk much," he said after a long pause. "I wasn't hired to," she replied softly. Brian gave a faint, humorless chuckle. "Most people can't stop talking around money." She looked at him, calm. "Money doesn't impress everyone." He studied her. "You think I was testing you, don't you?" She didn't answer. "You think I left that safe open on purpose?" Still, silence. Then, gently, she said, "I know you did." His jaw tightened. "And yet you passed." "I wasn't aware I was being tested. I was just being me." Brian looked away, ashamed. "I've been betrayed by people I trusted," he said suddenly. "People I loved." "And so now you test strangers," Rita said, "to make sure they'll fail first." His eyes met hers, sharp but not cold this time. Just lost. 32 minutes. That's how long they were trapped together. By the time the elevator kicked back to life, they hadn't moved physically, but something else had. A weight had shifted. She saw more than a suit now, and he saw more than a maid. At this point, what would you do if you were Rita? Keep your distance, or start asking why this man is really watching you? Drop your answer in the comments below. Rita was vacuuming the library when she found it, a torn envelope tucked between two books. Her hand paused mid-swipe. Curiosity was dangerous, but the name caught her eye. Lena James, a woman's name, same last name as him, scrawled in shaky cursive, addressed to Brian. She didn't open it. She placed it on the nearest table, carefully, and walked away. Later that night, Brian entered the library, saw the envelope sitting on the polished wood. He stared at it for a long time. Then, without turning, he said, "Where did you find this?" Rita, standing in the doorway, kept her voice steady. "Between the books. I didn't read it." "I know you didn't," he said quietly. He picked it up and sat down, suddenly looking older, tired. "My mother," he said. "That was her last letter. She died before I could reply." Rita didn't move. "I was angry with her. Thought she abandoned me after my father left. Thought she stopped caring. But after she passed, I found this." A pause. "Turns out she'd written every month. I just never opened the mailbox. I was too proud." Rita's voice was barely above a whisper. "Pride hides a lot of pain." Brian looked at her. "And what does silence hide?" She didn't want to answer, but the words came anyway. "My mum worked 3 jobs, cleaned homes until her bones gave up. She taught me dignity had nothing to do with money, that even if we scrubbed toilets we didn't bow to anyone." She swallowed. "She died when I was 21. I was supposed to be at the hospital, but I picked up an extra shift. Thought I had more time." Brian didn't speak. He didn't have to. Pain recognizes pain, especially when it's spoken in quiet, steady voices. The night was too quiet. Brian sat in the garden courtyard, something he rarely did, a glass of wine in hand, no phone, no laptop, just stillness. He barely noticed Rita walk past until she paused at the edge of the patio. "I didn't know you used this space," she said gently. He looked up. "I didn't. Not until tonight." She nodded, then made a move to go. "You can sit if you want." She hesitated, but sat, a few feet away, not too close. For a while they just watched the fountain, listened to the water. The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was restful. "You ever just forget how to be around people?" Brian asked suddenly. Rita raised an eyebrow. "You mean rich people?" He gave a dry chuckle. "I mean people. Period." Rita smiled. "I talk to bleach and tile grout more than humans these days." That made him laugh, genuinely, the kind of laugh that caught even him off guard. "I like that," he said. "You don't try too hard. Everyone in my world's always performing." "I wouldn't know how to fake it even if I tried," she replied. There it was again, truth spoken like air. Rita looked at a small bonsai tree on the ledge. "My mum loved these, said they reminded her that good things take patience." Brian stared at it. "I hated these things. My dad used to cut them when he was stressed." They both looked at each other, 2 entirely different upbringings, same tree, same damage. "I guess we both watched things get trimmed down by people who didn't know how to care for them," Rita said softly. Brian blinked, and something in his chest, something old and locked, loosened. The conversation lingered longer than either expected. Eventually, Rita stood. "I should get back," she said. "Stay a minute," Brian said, softer than he meant to. She paused. "I'm not good at this," he admitted. "People, connection, I never learned how." Rita looked at him with kind eyes. "No one starts good at it. We learn by trying." Their eyes held for a second too long, but then she smiled, a small, respectful smile, and walked away. He watched her go. For the first time, not because he was analyzing, but because he felt something he didn't want to admit. Rita walked into the office Monday morning to find the air colder. Brian didn't look up. No smile, no warmth, no invitation. Just a tight nod and a sharp voice. "Close the door behind you." She obeyed. "Sit," he added. Something in her stomach twisted. He slid a printed photo across the desk. A blurry still from a camera feed. Her, in the library, finding the envelope. "You said you didn't read it," Rita blinked. "I didn't." "Then why did it take you 3 minutes to place it on the table?" She frowned. "I was just surprised. I recognized the name." He leaned back, cold now, distant, guarded again. "That letter was never supposed to be seen. It was private." "I didn't read it," she repeated, firmer this time. "I told you the truth." But it didn't matter. The wall had come back up. Brian stood. "I've had enough people betray me by pretending to care. I don't need it in my own house." Her eyes welled. "So that's what this was. You let me think. We were seeing each other clearly, and now I'm back to being the help." He didn't answer, didn't move, didn't look at her. Rita rose from the chair slowly. "I've cleaned blood off hospital floors, Mr. James, held dying patients' hands when no family came. I've buried my mother alone. I've had nothing but my word." She stepped toward the door. "And now I know even that's not enough for you." She left before the tears fell. He let her, and the office, once filled with her quiet presence, felt colder than ever. Brian poured himself another drink that night, his fourth. Her voice echoed in his head. "Now I know even that's not enough for you." He had tested her again, this time with his fear, not his safe. And this time, he'd failed. He wasn't angry at her. He was angry at himself. The next morning, Rita folded her uniform with slow, deliberate care. Her contract still had 2 weeks left, but she knew she couldn't stay where she wasn't trusted, not after everything they'd shared. She looked around her tiny staff room, eyes lingering on the photo of her and her mother taped to the wall. The words she'd said still burned in her chest. "Now I know even that's not enough for you." She zipped her suitcase closed, but her hand hovered over the doorknob. Brian stared at the security feed from the day Rita found the envelope. She hadn't opened it. He slowed the footage frame by frame. She'd picked it up, read the name, froze, then clutched it like something sacred before gently placing it on the table. No curiosity, no invasion, only reverence. And then he saw it. A single tear. She'd cried, and again, not because of guilt, but because she understood loss. He saw himself as a boy, tearing open birthday cards from his mother and throwing them away unopened. She'd written for years, and he ignored her every time. Because pain and pride don't often leave room for grace, and now he'd done the same to someone else. He grabbed his coat and rushed to the elevator. Rita had just stepped out into the driveway when the butler handed her a sealed envelope. "Mr. James asked me to give you this." She turned it over, her name in his handwriting. She hesitated, then opened it. "Rita, I built my life behind safes, metal ones and emotional ones. You've opened both without ever trying. I see that now. You didn't fail the test. I did. If you can forgive me, I'll be in the courtyard, waiting." Her breath caught. For a full minute she didn't move. Then, slowly, she turned around. The sun had dipped low, casting golden light across the courtyard stone path. Brian stood there, palms sweating slightly, adjusting his cuffs, then undoing them. No mask, no power pose, just a man, waiting. He didn't know if she'd come. He didn't know if she should, but he waited anyway. Then, footsteps. He turned. Rita, still in her modest clothes, no uniform, hair pinned back, dignified as ever. They locked eyes. She stepped forward, slowly, not forgiving him yet, but not walking away either. "I thought you weren't coming," he said quietly. "I almost didn't," she replied. "I've spent my life walking away from people who see me as less." Brian nodded. "And I've spent mine pushing away anyone who sees me too much." They stood in silence for a beat. Then Brian said, "You were never the one being tested. I was. I just didn't know it." Rita's eyes softened. "You thought I'd steal, but what you really feared was that I might stay." That truth hit him harder than anything else had. "I was wrong," he said. "I see that now." "And what do you see?" she asked. He took a breath. "I see a woman with more strength than I've ever had, more integrity than I've ever earned, and more grace." There was a pause. Then he added, "You were right that day, in the office." Rita tilted her head. Brian looked at her, really looked at her, and whispered, "You've been poor, but never broken." Rita blinked, eyes glistening. Then, for the first time, she smiled. Fully. They didn't touch, didn't kiss, didn't rush, just stood there. Two people, finally honest. Then Brian said, almost shyly, "I'm not asking for anything. I just hope this isn't the end." Rita looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once. "It doesn't have to be." And for the first time in years, Brian James, the millionaire CEO, felt rich in something that couldn't be locked in a safe. Do you believe true love or genuine connection can survive being tested this hard? Would you have forgiven him if you were Rita? Share your thoughts in the comments. Someone else might need to read them.